I have a agenda for the work session.
I think being in here just
it just throws you for a loop.
There are 3 things.
That's when I could get my. Thanks.
no executive session stuff.
Okay. Good.
I informed the mayor, but just FYI, when we get to regular, we've changed our comment cards to yellow.
Oh. Okay.
So,
Well, it sounds pretty.
for any yellow cards, they want to talk.
Cool.
Okay. And anybody that's been saving up green cards, we're just going to ignore them.
These people have stockpiles at home.
There probably are. Yeah, it's like, okay, I want to talk about this. I'm going to write that down right now. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Yeah. Okay.
All right, everybody ready? Okay, I'll call to order the work session for August 21st, 2018, and we'll start out with Captain Strait and conversation about speed enforcement technology.
Thank you.
Oh, and Sergeant Morrow.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, thanks for having us today. As you said, this is to discuss speed enforcement and technology options and recommendations. I know you folks have all been provided with the staff report and most likely have had a chance to review that. I'm going to skim through it, and then I assume if there's anything of particular interest in there that you want to talk about or have questions about, you'll obviously let us know. Sergeant Marl has been with the Milwaukee Police Department for a little bit long, like a year longer than I have, well over 20 years. He's always been passionate about traffic enforcement, and he's more of an expert on the matter than I am, and that's part of the reason that he is here. He's also the sergeant that supervises our traffic program. So skimming through the reports and kind of hitting on the highlights, and I'll try not to waste too much of your time on any one section. As far as the history, back in 2017, Chief Bartol presented information related to traffic data collection to you folks. He explained that we were having challenges with the photo radar program and some performance issues with regard to that. In 2018, Chief Bartol sent the council an email letting them know that attempts to recruit a person to fill that position had ultimately been unsuccessful, and we were giving notice to Red Flex that we were going to suspend that program. That can be a difficult position to fill. We had filled it internally at the point that we had someone that was pretty much ready to retire, and that kind of fit into where they were at in their career. But that's not anything that we've ever mandatoried anybody to do. You have to definitely want to do that. And we would never force someone to do that. And then finding the right fit for that, if we go outside, can also be challenging because we're, again, looking for the right person. So we ran into problems with that. It was at that point that the council asked Chief Bartol to review photo red light with fixed photo speed enforcement and take a look at our traffic hotspots at our 5 main intersections. We then asked Red Flex to conduct surveys at our hotspot intersections, which are Highway 224 in Oak, Highway 224 in Harrison, Highway 99 in Washington, Harrison, and Millport. And those were previously identified as hotspot intersections based on analysis on where crashes were occurring. So Red Flex then did surveys at those intersections. That involved them putting out cameras at all of those intersections and monitoring them for a 12-hour period from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. After they finished with that data gathering, they then prepared a report which they sent us. And I know we've attached portions of that report for you folks to look at. They focused on left turn violations, through intersection violations, right turn violations, and it would be worth noting that ultimately that program, we have the option of making adjustments to how strict we want to be with regard to violations, but in their report they recorded and noted all violations, however slight. So they do tell you if you go further with the program, then you can look at the parameters of that and say, okay, that's not a violation we would be comfortable issuing a citation for, which typically an officer would do when they're face-to-face, seeing the violation and then also dealing with the offender. But for the purposes of their study, they noted any violation, essentially, if that makes sense.
Yep.
The categories of the red light violations which create the greatest concern for us are the through violations and the left turn violations, and that's because of the potential or likelihood for collision with cross traffic that oftentimes would be going at a high rate of speed. So the chance of that being a more significant accident resulting in more significant injury goes way up. And with regard to the photo red light enforcement, obviously those through violations are the primary focus of the study that we requested. Red Flex noted in their report to us that they could project or predict that we would be capable of issuing a little over 1,500 citations. But from reviewing that report, you can see that 56 of those would potentially be for through violations and left-hand turns, and the rest would be for other infractions. The right-hand turn violations were very high, and again, that does note any infraction, however slight. So a vehicle may come very close to a stop, but roll through that at a very low rate of speed. When an officer's seeing that in person, they would decide if that was something they would be comfortable writing a citation for. Again, their report did note all infractions, however slight.
So I have a question about that. Are their cameras good enough that they would be able to note distracted driving behavior? Because just reading this report, that seems to be a lot of our accidents.
There was no discussion with them about them having the capability to do that.
If we had red light cameras, would they be capable of?
To my knowledge, they're capable of the violations that we've discussed, and then if you have justified the red light cameras, then you also have the option of adding fixed speed enforcement at those same locations. I'm not aware of them having the option of doing cell phone or distracted driver
It's
violations.
pretty much the same as photo radar. There was many photo radar pictures that the van was taking that you would see the person speeding, but they were also on their phone.
Right.
It's actually written in the law that you can't do anything other than speed. Okay. Even if you see the picture shows a person clearly talking on their phone.
It doesn't matter. All right, good. Thanks.
So just to highlight some of the examples of the information they gave us, at Highway 224 and Oak Street for the 12-hour period, there were potentially 51 violations. 47 of those were for right turn on red. At Highway 224 in Harrison, there were 10 potential violations in the 12-hour period, with 9 of those being for right turn on red. Based on the data they provided us, we then evaluated crashes at our hotspot intersections for an 18-month period. We used the most recent 6 months, January to June of 2018, as well as all of the calendar year of 2016. The reason we did that is because we had previously polled all the crashes for 2016, so we had those, and we were comfortable that we had good information there. And we knew that we could pull accurate data from January to June of 18. We have changed databases and CAD systems and records management systems multiple times in that middle period, which would have made it definitely complicated to try and pull the data and know for sure that we were extremely accurate with it. But we felt comfortable that we were going to be reviewing an 18-month period and that we had good information. And we highlighted in the report that you have there the information that we got from that review. You have a fair amount of detail, but the overall summary came out as a total 40 accidents reviewed in the 18-month period that were determined to be intersection related. So we looked at all the accidents, pulled them up, read the narratives, and looked at diagrams to determine if they were or were not related to an intersection. So for that 18 months we looked at, we determined 40 of the accidents were. 20 of them, or 50%, occurred at Highway 9090 in Millport. Some of these are just fun facts that we found interesting. 15 of them, or 39%, were for following too closely or distracted drivers. Now, typically, those would be rear-end crashes with no good explanation for why it happened. But those would be rear-end crashes in intersections with no good logical reason for it happening. When we see folks using a cell phone, we can cite them for distracted driving, but they don't generally volunteer to crash that they were on their phone. So anyways, 15 or 39% were following too closely distracted drivers. 5 accidents, or a little under 8%, were related to running red lights.
So can I, just to clarify what you said, Sergeant Marl, you said the state law that allows red light cameras does not allow you to cite for other things?
I am only basing that off of what photo radar was saying before. Again, it was a very light system. You couldn't do anything but the speed. So if you saw, we got pictures of people not wearing their seatbelts, and it has to be strictly just to the speed.
But I guess even if you couldn't cite for it, you could still have something in your letter or something that says, we note that you were, so that you kind of put them on notice that they were seen doing it, even if you're not actually adding a citation for it.
They received the picture also, so I guess if we highlighted it and said seatbelt should be here.
Yeah. Here's your camera. We see your camera.
Someone could just be like, swigging as they're getting a red light and
Yeah, it does seem, container law. Yeah. And I wanted to understand the chart here with the data from the tests on page WS4. So especially the Oak Street and Highway 224 eastbound, westbound, the numbers are so vastly different. So I'm assuming the east and westbound means 224 east and westbound. I mean, that intersection, it's hard to know kind of what's east.
Right.
And what.
Yes, it would be Highway 224 eastbound and westbound.
So the eastbound traffic going out from town is going, it would make sense to me that it's going slower because it's come through 2 other lights just then, and it's come off of 99, and so maybe that makes sense as to why it's maybe going slower and there's less infractions. But that's a huge difference between westbound and eastbound, and that was hard for me to...
So it would be worth noting that we did independent surveys of speed and got slightly different results than that. We haven't gone, that's like a bit of a rabbit trail that we didn't want to dive too deep into. But it is worth noting that we did independent surveys of speed at those same intersections and got slightly different results. As far as...
You mean of speed, but not of turns?
Correct.
Okay.
As far as the discrepancies in the numbers you see there, I don't necessarily have a great explanation for it.
Yeah.
You're talking about the turns, Lisa, on the Oak Street and 224?
Yeah, if you just look, there's a total of 524. The expected monthly notices printed, the violations were 524 going in one direction and 57 going in the other direction, like 10% as many. That just seems a little,
What, do you know what time of day it was?
Well, they said it was a 12-hour.
6:30 p.m.
Yeah, it was a 12-hour.
It just has something to do with people coming home from work versus leaving, and the fact that the population density is more north of 224, and so there's more likely to do. It may have to do with not just how fast they were going, how many lights, but the number of cars, vehicles going that direction.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't make an attempt to come up with an explanation for the number difference there.
I have a question. To follow up to a little bit on Lisa. So when I'm looking at this chart, it has the date that says 123, but at the very top it says survey results for 207. Is that because that's when they compiled the chart versus the date that they ran the test?
I believe that would be the date they ran the test.
Which one, 123 or the 27?
The 27.
What's the 123 then?
And 124 for Millport.
Where?
Well, it says city.
That column.
Okay.
which is different than the date at the top when it talks about the.
Okay, well, maybe I was inaccurate. Maybe.
I think they did the tests on these days, and then they combine the results for that day. That's when they made the report.
Made the chart.
That could be, yeah.
Because it does say they watched a video to compile it all, so there would be some time involved to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So I noticed that the overall numbers are not huge, but there were some of the numbers, like for the 2016 actual accidents.
Yeah.
At Millport and at a couple of the intersections, a third were attributable to turns. They weren't the leading cause, but a third of all accidents. If we cut a third of accidents, that would be substantial to me. So I guess, I can understand the, I can understand it doesn't look that persuasive, but on the other hand, if we cut accidents by a third, I'd say that'd be a great thing.
Sure. So we do note the high occurrence of following too close and distracted driver. There were some crash reports, and I did not make an attempt to kind of document this in the report. There were some through violations where the cause, again, was distracted drivers. So the one thing that is clear from this particular report is that distracted driving is by far the leading cause of accidents drastically. And if we look at the intersections where those are particular problems, which they can be problems anywhere, but if we say this is by far the leading cause of accidents, then there are ways that we can adjust our enforcement throughout the city, but particularly at specific intersections. Like if we say 99 in Millport is a real problem intersection statistically, and distracted driving is the leading cause, we definitely can develop enforcement strategies that we think would have an impact on that. And we believe potentially more of an impact than the photo red light enforcement.
So can we, when you talk about distracted driving, I know you wouldn't have statistics on this, but what's your gut feeling about what percentage of that is cell phones versus other forms of distracted driving?
I would say the higher percentage is cell phones, but there is so much going on in cars nowadays. It's not just the phone. Most of them are Bluetooth this, this is going off, the chimes are going off, this is going off. They've gotten so bad that you don't even have to pay attention to your lane because your vehicles keep you within your lane. That's making people more, they're like, well, I can do other things while I'm driving. So a lot of it is, maybe not the cell phone, but I was looking down at my radio. I was looking down at my display. I was looking at this. I looked back up, the light had changed, and everybody in front of me had stopped. It's a huge percentage, but more often than not, it's a cell phone.
Do you have you had any, this is kind of going off topic a little bit, but have you had any indication that those electronic billboards have added to distracted driving? People like watching them change and trying to read them?
I haven't had any experience with that, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
That's true.
That's a good question.
That intersection.
Yeah, it is close to that intersection. Yep. Yeah. And I will tell you that I sit there and watch it. I count how many seconds it's been up, and I wait to see if make sure it's not changing more often than it's supposed to. But so it's distracting. Anyway, I didn't want to.
You had more, I think, right?
I do have a little bit more. As far as the budget impacts, which I'm sure you folks have reviewed, when we discontinued the photo radar van, we did give up one full-time position, and the court also gave up a half-time position. If we wanted to get back into photo enforcement, We estimate that it would cost us probably $58,000 for a half-time police officer position, and the court would also need to reinstate their position. As far as additional kind of projected workload impacts, we talked to the city of Sherwood. They're doing photo red light just at 2 intersections, and they said they currently have 6 officers which review film part-time. So there is a significant hit on your personnel to manage that kind of project, and that's doing 2 intersections.
Did you say 6?
6. Mm-hmm. 6 that do it as
like a collateral duty, so they're not half-time. Or
they didn't give us like a ratio, like how much time does that person spend. They just said they have 6 people assigned. It takes 6 people if they're part-time doing the police officer job and part-time reviewing film. They also have 1 administrative person that spends half their time running that program, and they have 1 full-time court employee dedicated to that program, and that's with photo red light at 2 intersections. They indicated they currently issue about 5,500 citations per year, and again, Red Flex initial estimate was that we could issue up to 19,000 citations per year. Our average citations per year right now is around 5,000. If we go back and look for the highest year we had when we were doing the photo radar van, in 2013 we issued almost 16,000 citations, and that would have been with a couple of additional traffic officers working also at that time. Just to put in perspective, the 19,000 possible citations a year. Sherwood is looking at moving to speed on green at those 2 locations, and they anticipate hiring 1 additional full-time officer to facilitate that program.
what does that mean, speed on green? You mean people who hit the gas when they, no.
It just means the recording the speed of people that are passing through.
Oh, just recording. Oh.
So you can't use that technology and just do fixed photo speed on green, but if you use the technology for photo red light, you have the option of adding fixed speed on green. So essentially fixed radar at those intersections, you're doing photo red light.
Right.
Do we have any idea of what the cost of the equipment is for these?
We do not get actual numbers from Red Flex on the cost of the equipment. We would project that the revenue created by the program would cover the startup expenses and the ongoing expenses.
So the 19,000 estimate is based on the sort of zero tolerance.
That's correct.
The way they were doing it. So it's not necessarily that we would generate that many.
That's
if you
correct.
chose to have a more forgiving.
Yes. Yeah. If an agency or a city moves forward with that, then they kind of set the parameters of watch this on video and decide if you think that warrants a citation. And essentially, you're setting speed and the parameters you want to operate under, what you would be comfortable with.
So on the right turn question, does that also include failure to yield to pedestrians?
It would not with their program because they're strictly looking at the
whether they stopped or not.
Yeah. So their program knows when the light turned red and where the car was in relation to that. Is that accurate? Yeah. So as far as community involvement in this program, Chief Bartol did meet with the Public Safety Advisory Committee and discussed this option with them. Their position on the issue was they would support using technology if it was necessary and appropriate to deal with a specific problem. They obviously are a little bit leery of any program that appears or could appear to be motivated based on revenue. And they did appreciate the fact that we asked the question and cared about the answer. Previously, when we used the photo radar van, when we were questioned or challenged on that issue, we were very comfortable showing that speed was a factor in crashes in the area we were using the photo radar van. With the information that we have here from the 18-month crash analysis, it would be more difficult to say that photo red light violations were a problem that warranted issuing the number of citations the program might potentially issue. Versus that the information we got showed something like distracted driving, cell phone usage was the leading cause of accidents, and that we could develop strategies that would effectively combat that. There could be a combination of education as well as enforcement. We also, partly in thanks to Kelly Brooks, were able to establish some dialogue with ODOT. And they have some very good documentation that talks about the causes of crashes and mitigating factors and percentages associated with those different causes and options to deal with those. And we're in the process of kind of reviewing all the hotspot intersections to determine if we're where we should be on those, or if there are ways to improve those that don't include significant overhaul of the intersection. In some cases, it could be signing it differently. Like, for example, at 224 and Oak, if you're on Oak Street with McDonald's on your left and you want to make that left turn onto Highway 224, there is a dedicated left turn lane, and it just has a sign hanging that says left turn yield to oncoming traffic. There's room there to evaluate an intersection like that. That sign hangs from a power line, and so I would conclude there's power there. We could easily hang a dedicated signal for that lane. They have enhanced signals with reflective backers. So there's room there to evaluate how the intersections are currently operating, and if there's low-cost changes, like, for example, we changed the timing in some of the lights to give pedestrians a several-second head start. Things like that. Mm-hmm. And we believe that there are some things we could do that would improve the safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists.
Well, and that's on planning and engineering's list, right? Though revisiting those 224 intersections. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we actually, I'm looking at Kelly, but I believe we have requested that ODOT prioritize one of those intersections in their upcoming project list,
So based on this information, it's our recommendation at this time that we do not proceed with the photo red light program. We feel confident that with the information we have, we can move forward with an enforcement program that deals with the most common causes of accidents at these intersections and continue to have an impact on those causes and on the overall safety in those intersections. We also, Sergeant Marl currently has some grants in process that we're using, and I think you've also applied for several other grants. Yes,
right now we have a seatbelt grant, but when the officers are out working those grants, they can do more than just enhanced patrol for seatbelts. There can be any traffic-related activity while they're working. This year, it looks like ODOT has divided those grants up and kind of separated that out. I have applied for a DUI enforcement grant, a seatbelt enforcement grant. They've separated out a separate grant that's just to enforce speeding, and the other one is specifically for distracted driving, and I've applied for all of those grants.
And those fund overtime? Is that basically what you do with those?
Correct.
You fund overtime to have more people doing traffic?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we really need, is just more people doing traffic.
Yeah.
The advantage of people is we have to look somebody in the face when we give them a ticket and feel good about it. A technology-based enforcement program does not have to look an offender or violator in the eye and hand them a ticket, and it tends to be a more black and white system in general. In talking with ODOT, they also said their complaints that the timing is off on intersection lights drastically goes up when a city or an agency begins using a photo red light type program. People will naturally, their first offense will be the timing on the light changed, and that's why, or I did not commit the infraction and there's a technology problem at the intersection. So it does definitely increase their workload. To what extent, I'm not certain, but And I know, like you mentioned at the one intersection, that the red light violations accounted for a third of the accidents. But that is over an 18-month period with I think in that intersection with the number being 2 that were.
One intersection was 2 out of 6 and one intersection was 3 out of 9.
Okay.
But they said those were, either turn or through. So you're saying the through may have also been distracted driving, so it's hard to know.
In some cases they are. In several of the reports I read, there were witnesses that said the car didn't slow down and went right through a fully red light. So my conclusion is that person was not paying attention. They were doing something other than paying attention and driving. So if we're using real bodies to work traffic enforcement, then we can set up well in advance of those intersections and watch for distracted drivers, because those are the people that are getting into accidents at the intersection like 99 and Millport. Now, it's a complicated intersection to enforce traffic at, but the problem is occurring before it gets to 99 and Millport. It's occurring on the approach. But when you get to that complicated intersection, that's when it becomes a real problem for them.
I've had this little evil idea while we've been talking about those electronic billboards. The city should rent some time on them and should have cameras stationed at the intersections and start beaming pictures up there of the people going by with their cell phones, talking on their cell phones. Do a little embarrassment, shaming or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Do you find that the number of people on their cell phones like this is going down because of all the Bluetooth? And I'm on my phone sometimes, but I'm never holding it.
The actual up to the ear has probably, I would say, from what my experience, has decreased. What's even more dangerous now is people know now that all a police officer has to do is see that device in your hand, so they're holding it down even lower.
And then
and there's a lot of people that I see going by all the time. I know what they're doing, but I can't see the phone, so therefore I can't write them the ticket because they're holding it down even lower and having to look down even further, and it's another cause of accidents.
And I still see, I'm not out at rush hour. I'm not out that much, and I still see handheld phones all the time. All the time.
Kendra.
Kendra goes
3 days a week, she's yelling about some person who was on their phone. She always yells at them, too.
Yeah.
Which in the summer.
Hear her, but she loves to.
Oh, no, in the summer,
they're still talking on the phones. I see a little bit less of the actual to the ear, but I see a lot of this.
Oh, yeah.
Or just people looking down. You don't see the phone, you just see them face down while they're driving and at lights. We did recently move a person back into the full-time traffic position. That's Officer Zane Odom, who had previously worked in traffic for 5 years, I believe. And we're also in the process of assigning another person to work that in addition to their normal job. And we do feel with Officer Odom will be overlapped working some of the same days and hours that Sergeant Marl works, and having 2 people that are assigned to and passionate about traffic enforcement allows you to work some missions that are specific to the data. So they're kind of intelligence data-led missions that we really believe will make a difference with what are our leading causes of accidents and leading locations.
I think your recommendation makes sense. I would like to see us still lobby the state for more flexibility with what we can do with these cameras, and how we can use them. It's kind of crazy to me that the state, on 99 and 224, the state's probably always going to have a role because they are state highways, but just generally the idea that the state controls, what speed limits we put on our city streets is crazy to me.
Agreed.
Anybody else? Well, it'll be interesting to see. One of the things when we saw the reports that were going into the, I always mess this up, the big metro transportation plan. Kelly, help me. The big, fat, huge RTP. Thank you.
Oh, regional transportation.
There's a whole section on safety. And they were doing the Vision Zero stuff. And interestingly, the only section of 99E that was not a high crash corridor was Milwaukee's section of 99E. That was it. North all the way to the border and south all the way past Oregon City, high crash corridor on 99E. But ours was the only section that was.
And it was all of Milwaukee, or it was just downtown where the speed limit drops? It
pretty much, it almost started at the border, but it was hard to tell. It's a little map, right?
Yeah.
But it was pretty obvious that our enforcement over the years has made a difference for safety. So it will be interesting to see now if that starts to creep back up because of this.
Yeah,
but
we would be interested in pulling stats at the end of the calendar year and reviewing those again and seeing where we're at.
Sorry, you're talking about, you're saying the map shows all of 99. Where are you talking, at what starting point are you talking about, like toward Portland?
Oh, it starts up north.
North
it's a Washington
so you're
border.
talking all the way up, okay.
All the way down.
So then speed is not just a factor, because obviously we drop down our speed in our downtown area.
Right.
And
speed and enforcement.
Right.
I mean, those are the two big things, right? And so we've got
but the speed is lower on other sections as well, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Well, and in some of those areas where the speed is lower, they have a lot more pedestrian movements and stuff that than we do. Yeah.
I'll be interested to see sort of the program that you guys develop around, particularly if you're going to go after distracted driving. I know a lot. I see a lot of it at Harrison and 99E. Because I walk that intersection a couple times a day, and people making that right turn to go south on 99 aren't paying attention half the time, and there's a lot of close calls.
Yeah, so. I don't doubt that, and I think there's room for us to continue to target that significantly.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Kelly Brooks and Jason Wachs on the CAReFREE Sundays event.
Got it. Good evening. As the mayor mentioned, I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about, give you an update on where we are with what is called CAReFREE Sunday, but I'm going to get to that in my presentation. So I did put some slides together to kind of go through kind of where we are and where we're headed, and then obviously so you can stop me as I go and ask questions, but hopefully we have time at the end as well. So since our last discussion, I was here in February earlier in the year, and we talked about kind of where we wanted to go with this event, moving forward with an open streets event in our city. And at that point, staff was directed to look to 2019 for our first event, and also look at one of the options that was presented back then was a 5.5 mile loop. So we're looking at that type of a model moving forward. Staff then discussed the naming of the event with council on June 5th. And finally, we had a community kickoff meeting on June 18th, which some of you attended, where we invited community members in to kind of talk to them about how they might be able to help us plan, organize, and get excited and involved in the event moving forward. So basically, after that meeting, folks at that community meeting were given the opportunity to help us name the event. So How we did that was there was a public process to collect ideas first. Then we did some staff research, looking around at different events like it around the United States and outside the United States. City Council gave us their feedback, and then we allowed the folks at the community meeting to give us theirs. And basically what resulted was, and it was unanimous at the community meeting on June 18th, that CAReFREE Sunday would be our name. So that's where we're at. As you can see, when we write it, in some instances, we will be capitalizing the CAReFREE aspect of it, because I know council had a desire to do so. At that point, we've worked with a graphic designer to look at a logo. Really trying to get at the fact that I know council had a lot of interest in making this an inclusive event, not necessarily focusing on bicycles or really one type of transportation or even aspect of the event. And we looked at a lot of different options. What ultimately we arrived at was having a very simple logo to start with that would look good on printed material, T-shirts, all of our collateral that we're going to be creating online, that sort of thing. And then over time, we'll use that logo and our marketing material to kind of hit all of the various modes that people enjoy with this event: walking, biking, skateboarding, roller skating, pushing strollers, and that sort of thing. And we also really wanted to make sure that some of our branding was included. So the blue that we chose is our Milwaukee blue, and we really just think this will kind of stand out and really be a good logo for us moving forward. In terms of when the event, we really wanted to get a date on the calendar. So we're really looking at August 4th of next year, 11 to 4. Those hours could change. That's generally what Sunday Parkways was. They go 11 to 4, so we're thinking of keeping that same model. We really looked at this date in terms of the weather, impacting other events like it, in terms of Sunday Parkways events, the Bridge Pedal, and favorable weather. Obviously, August can be hot,
smoky,
and could potentially be smoky. But we also, saw hot weather in July this year, September, and I really think we're just trying to avoid the rain is kind of the one part of it. So, after this first year, we can reevaluate whether or not that is a good date or not. There's, plus and minuses to every month that we looked at, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about the consultant that we'd like to use to help us, and really, this date also really works for them. And it also works, I think, for the city in terms of how our events kind of lay out throughout the season. So that is the date we're looking at this point, and I think it'll work pretty well. In terms of the route, in all of our conversations, this is going to be the route that we're going to try this first year. A good chunk of it on the western side of the route is pretty much mirrors what we've done for Sunday Parkways the last few years. We're still looking at these 3 locations for activity areas, so Water Tower Park and our 40th and Harvey building, Ball Michelle Park, and then the soon-to-be-completed Wichita Park. Whether or not we program 3 areas really depends on our budget, how much, volunteerism we have, and how many activities we can fit into those spaces, how many vendors, how much vendor interest we have, all of that kind of stuff will kind of drive that. But we definitely want to do 2. We'd like to really make sure we program 2 areas that are separated from each other. And, we think that Water Tower Park would definitely be one of them, just because it's such a good location and we have control over the space and there's a lot of room there. Whether or not it's Ball Michelle Park or Wichita Park, I think could be the other thing that we could discuss.
Well, one point I'd make is, and I've said this before, and I think Wichita Park, it might be especially good for this since it's a new park and it's a corner and that's a pretty active neighborhood, is, maybe there's one of the 3 we could give to another group to program, and the city would have to obviously have some oversight over what they ultimately plan, but let the NDA and the PTO and the maybe Rotary, because there's a lot of Rotary folks active in that neighborhood, do, come up with a plan for Wichita Park if they're interested in doing that,
Yeah,
and then just present to the city, here's what we do, and and then it becomes not a burden, not as much of a burden for you and for staff, but still gets us activities in all three parks,
I think at the meeting that Jason will talk about in a minute too, there was some discussion about how to use volunteers to help activate other areas even outside these parks. So, kind of pop-up parties or things like that. So I know that that's a conversation that's going to be continuing to play out in the volunteer efforts around it as well, but point well taken.
Yeah, and I think in talking about Sunday Parkways, they've always had a desire to have more people have block parties since they're already closing streets connected to the route. Encouraging more people to just come out and have their own block parties could be another kind of opportunity to have activity areas, basically. So we will try to do that as much as we possibly can, because then, they don't have to do anything. They just pretty much come outside and the street's already blocked. So the volunteer committee met on June 18th. We're going to meet again on September 17th, and we're going to look to break up into three sort of subcommittees. One would be sponsorship and fundraising. One is volunteer leadership and sort of developing and recruiting volunteers, and then the other one is activity area planning. So I'm going to take a first shot at the group that we have at sort of splitting them up, and then we'll talk about whether or not that makes sense, because they all filled out interest forms, and so I have a general idea of how they'd like to be involved. So I'll use that to try my best to split them up, and then we'll go from there.
So you sent an email out to everybody who had been at that meeting, but are you also advertising the September 17th meeting, like for new people for Friday?
I haven't at this point. I have been to the folks. People have been contacting me after that meeting who want to be involved, so they're included in that. I haven't necessarily opened it up wider than that, mostly because I'd like to sort of come up with actual committees. I think from there we can open it up a little bit more to join in on that. And also I'm going to have to kind of weigh, like, from that first meeting to the second meeting, I have a feeling we may lose folks. I don't know exactly who all completely wants to continue to be involved, so I think we'll reevaluate that and then kind of see how big the committees are going to be. But I would like to have a more focused committees if I can with this particular thing, and then maybe we can bring other folks in to help it with different aspects as well.
I mean, I would at least offer to the people who did come to, if you know somebody else who wants to get involved, bring them along, kind of thing. I mean, some of those bike advocate people are in clusters and know each other, so they,
Yeah, and that's what's been happening since that meeting. I've had folks sort of trickling in kind of after that. Oh, I heard that you guys had this meeting and I know so-and-so.
Yeah.
So that is definitely happening, so.
Okay.
So we're going to be looking at consulting services. Staff has met on August 2nd with Axiom Event Productions, who helps Sunday Parkways, and we are looking to hire them on and do a contract with them. They're revising what they gave us earlier in the year now to kind of reflect any new things that are happening. Haven't gotten that from them. It's a very busy time for them. They do the bridge pedal. They just, they've been extremely busy, but they have a great staff, and I think, overall, I think they're going to be a good fit for us. So that's what we're looking at soon. And then the other part is we're going to look at hiring a temporary staff person for about a year's duration to help with this event, but also potentially some of our other events as well, and hopefully bringing them on in the fall sometime. So I'm in the process of writing a job description and that sort of thing. Yeah. And then sponsorship and fundraising. So that's one thing we'll definitely be jumping in a little bit more about. I did bring a newly revised sponsorship packet that I can give everybody a copy of with our new logo on it. You can kind of see what it's going to look like. So one of the goals will be to come up with a plan to kind of who we're going to go talk to about this, get the volunteers committee that's going to be focused on some of this stuff activated, but then also have staff do some outreach as well to some groups and businesses and that sort of thing that we think would be good fits here. And then the other process we're looking at is how we could collect donations, whether that's online or what's probably going to be online, and folks could donate cash. we've seen that events like this that people are really interested in, that they're willing to give $5, $10, $20, here and there. So we'd be looking to set up something that would be easy for people to donate it if they'd like to. Vendors is another thing I'm looking at, trying to figure out a way that we can have vendors register, but also collect fees from them. It was looking at vendors. It's been highly recommended by the folks that I've talked to charge a fee. We haven't really determined what that fee is going to be yet, but we are looking to collect some sort of fee. It's not something it's something vendors expect to have to pay for something like this, so we'd be looking for some sort of process to do that online. And really the process I'm looking at first is how we currently collect our utility bills and when folks pay their traffic tickets. Because we already have that process, we might just be able to add on to that. So hopefully we can, it'll make it a little bit easier. And then finally, in your staff plan, I came up with an overall work plan. It's really kind of a snapshot of where we are today, and I really put that in there to give you kind of an idea of the breadth of kind of where we're headed, what we'll be working on. And that'll change over time. It pretty much changes daily. So the one you have is probably a little bit old already, but if you have any questions about what's kind of included in there and where we're headed, just let me know. And yeah, that's all I had for you tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
A couple questions.
Sure.
On the date, you had mentioned first Sunday. So I know that August 1st seems to be a great date in 2019 because it doesn't conflict with anything. Would the first Sunday of future years conflict? Does Sunday Parkways with Portland, does that move around, or
it tends to,
or anything else?
It's a good question because they don't have their schedule for next year out yet, but if you look historically, they don't do it that weekend.
They try to do the last Sunday of the month.
I see.
Sometimes it's the third Sunday, but it's generally at the end of the month.
Okay, so it normally wouldn't conflict. Okay. And then just when you mentioned online donations, has Sunday Parkways, or could we do some sort of day of donation? I mean, when I'm in the moment and I'm having a great time, especially in the afternoon after I've
couple of beers.
So anyway, I think that may be strike when the iron's hot sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I was
absolutely, yeah.
I don't know how this applies, but I was at the Boise airport the other day, and you have to take all your change out of your pockets and everything. There's like a place where you can drop your change as a donation for the zoo and a couple of other things. So we don't have metal detectors anywhere, I don't think, but if we ever do, we might have to come up with one.
It's like New Seasons with the little bean that you get. You can choose your cause. Maybe you can add on CAReFREE Sunday on there. I think Portland, when they first started Sunday Parkways a long time ago, they actually were able to raise quite a bit of money with just individual donations. So I think we'll be looking for those opportunities and making it as easy as possible. I think will be important. And so, after this meeting, we'll be really looking to make our website more robust, really start getting the word out, everywhere that we can. So, and maybe that's even, some of our events coming up. Obviously, we want to start talking about this event as well at other events.
Well, and some of the bigger donors that you approach could be approached as being a matching donor for a fundraising drive. So like, doing a GoFundMe or whatever, and X company or X organization will, match the first $10,000 we raise, or, whatever. I think that matching kind of thing can lure more contributions. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, so we're really excited about this event. And it's funny talking to the, thing about this. It's 1 year away, but it's going to go quick. So
really fast.
Really, the steps right now are kind of coming up with the protocols and all the sort of processes and forms and the website and all that stuff. I think this first year, and that's why a temporary staff person will be able to really help us kind of. Because, Portland has their system set up. We need our own system. Next year, the next year when we do it, it'll be a little bit simpler because we're not starting from scratch.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was mainly just up here in a supportive role because I really haven't been doing the work. Jordan and Jason have been doing all the work. But this is an important milestone and one that I know that was important to some of you to start being able to have materials, collateral that we can start saying this is the name, this is what it is, and can start moving into the fall and developing that fundraising plan and getting our volunteer committees really up and working. So I think these are the basics. We have the basics of the event now sorted out. We know how we're presenting it in the form of the logo and the materials. So I think we can move on now to kind of start cranking it up.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, great.
Well, thank you, Jason.
Are you going to put that out on social media?
The flyer.
The flyer. Well, I mean, not all the fundraising, but the general logo and some kind of thing, some kind of details on it.
The really next step is we have a website started, but then we'll start making it better and start putting it more places for sure. So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Thank
you, guys.
Good job.
All right, next up we have single-use plastic bag and polystyrene foam ban.
Are you going to leave us those?
Which is going to be presented by our Public Works Director, Peter Pastorelli.
Yep, thank you.
Jeez. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I am here tonight to talk a little bit about our proposed plastic, single-use plastic bag ban and polystyrene foam ban ordinance that hopefully we will adopt this evening. We've met two previous occasions. I gave a presentation and discussed some potential strategies back in May of this year. And at that meeting, we got some input from City Council and on which direction we wanted to go. And then in subsequent to that, in June, the City Council adopted a resolution with the intent to adopt a single-use bag ban and also take a look at some of the other plastic throwaways that we have out there that cause issues in the environment. We want to deal with these things because they are persistent in the environment. They don't biodegrade. They pollute the environment, not only the land, but also the waterways, and are problematic. They don't break down, or if they do break down, it's in tiny, tiny small pieces that get ingested by wildlife and other and aquatic life, and then it just sort of goes into the whole circle, and we end up eating that. So, it's a way to reduce those impacts. So really what I've done, and I'd worked with Council Abma a bit on this, is to develop an ordinance. It's a little small to see. But the basics of the highlights of the ordinance are we're focusing the single-use bag prohibition on retailers that are greater than 10,000 square feet in the community and retail and food providers that are on city-owned property as well. In addition to that, we're also looking at a polystyrene foam food container ban for those same retailers and food providers. There is a sort of a graduated penalty phase for that starts with a warning, and then if there's subsequent violations during a 12-month period, there's fines that increase from $100 to all the way up to $500. And then I'm proposing that ban doesn't take place until becomes effective March 1st, 2019, and that provides those retailers time to reduce the inventory that they have on stock. one amendment that I've had, I wanted to make a clarification on one of the definitions that were in the Exhibit A. That's part of the ordinance. Is I updated the definition of polystyrene foam. During the editing of the document, I had part of the definition drop out. So I've added that for clarification. And then I ended up actually removing the CFC reference because that's actually been banned by the federal government. It's no longer in production. So those...
And so is this definition enough for you guys to know when it's being violated?
Yeah,
this is the definition that's actually in Portland's.
Okay. Okay.
But there's not different kinds of foam manufacturing cartons where some would meet this definition and some wouldn't? Or do you know?
This is the manufacturers, the polystyrene foam, that's the definition of what they use. So the other types of plastic materials, the hard shell plastics, those don't apply to this definition. So we would still allow those types of uses.
We actually had Hillsborough reach out to us and let us know that some of the language that we had in the original was no longer allowed under federal law. So the reason we're striking this is this was actually banned in 1989. So the expectation that we would end up having some of these chemicals is just far slimmer. And this has sort of become the agreed upon definition with the sustainability people.
Okay.
Portland had actually adopted that CFC piece back in 1989 because of the issue with the ozone layer. So that's been regulated by the federal government and it's been removed. It's a prohibited compound now for production.
Does Hillsborough have a ban on all this stuff?
No, Peter called and said he's planning on going down this path with us. He really liked the ordinance, and he thought it was really well written and cleaned up, so he thought it was a nice representation. He had a couple of questions, and we were able to answer those quickly, but I expect they're going to go down the same path.
Is it Peter Brandon?
Yeah.
Does anybody in Clackamas County have an ordinance on this? Does LO or, you don't know?
Evan was going to come tonight from Clackamas County, so they were looking at the same thing. I think that there's sort of a renewed interest, but I defer to Peter if he's heard from other communities.
They have not, Evan, the county has not adopted it.
The county hasn't, but we don't know about other cities, what other cities might have done.
Yeah, Lako has not yet.
Westland or Waco would be the obvious candidates, or Wilsonville, yeah.
They just passed a resolution supporting the bond.
Yeah.
Last night.
So yeah, I wanted to amend that definition because there was an error there. So
okay, good. And the way it's written makes it pretty easy in a year or whenever we make it more broad than the square foot.
You just strike that language.
Mm-hmm.
It's just cool.
I think it can be adjusted pretty easily.
I wanted to highlight the impacted businesses for everybody. So there was 8 retail organizations that I have up there. And then our 2 properties that we use for the food carts, Milwaukee Station and our farmers market.
Now, I thought when we talked about it several months ago and you had the list, there was like 11 businesses and it included the bowling alleys, as I recall.
Our initial look at it was there were these retail organizations that had a larger footprint, but we found doing further research that they didn't provide those type of, takeout food, pieces there. There was a business or 2 that were retail, but they sold, trailers. So it wasn't small items.
Do you know if any of them on the list here of this 8 actually don't use plastic bags? I mean, does like Bob's Red Mill use plastic bags, for example? I don't know.
They do.
Yes.
I think just about all of them do.
Minimally, but yes.
Rite Aid definitely does. Dollar Tree does. Joanne does.
Yeah, I think they all do.
Millen does.
For sure.
I've gone to a couple of food carts where I've received all of the product in one serving. So
Where you've seen what?
all of the product in one serving. But everybody was, especially, well, the food cart discussions went really well. We did hear that back from Safeway in particular, and so we know that the letters got out and that people read them. And no one's here tonight, so I think you're probably in pretty good position.
I had a phone call this morning from the Mill End store and talked to them briefly about it.
From whom? I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Peter.
I'm sorry. I had a phone call this morning from the Mill End store and talked to them briefly about the ban and our timeline on it. So they didn't really have any really big concerns about it either.
Most of them are already complying in other jurisdictions.
Right?
So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, certainly all those chains are,
Right. And in terms of public outreach, so we have spent some time, Alma and her staff actually prepared a letter and flyers that they sent out to all of the impacted retailers. We had a meeting, I think it was 2 weeks ago, it would be 2 weeks ago this Friday, with the food cart vendors, sat down with them and talked about the plastic bag piece and the food container piece. You know, their primary concern, of course, is the increased cost to them. I think it roughly goes from about $6 a month to...
That didn't make sense to me.
I highlighted too.
That was like, that can't be that much of a jump.
That was a huge increase.
Well, it actually is. It's actually
65
to go to paper bags.
Well, it's not just
Or
paper
some kind
bags,
of-
it's also the food containers.
It's the food containers.
Styrofoam is cheaper, but...
Yeah, so there actually is an expense from $625 to $69 per month.
And that's the styrofoam problem? That's removing the styrofoam?
It says bags.
It was the bags, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, see that?
It was more
I can't find it
impactful
now.
for them.
It's right here.
Yeah, from $625 to $69 a month.
Yeah, Richard had provided the cost information from one of the suppliers that showed how much the difference in the bags are versus the paper bags. Their concern focused more on the to-go food containers. There's some additional expense there.
Although, like the sushi place is already using the paper.
Many of them do, and actually during that time, many of them brought out
or whatever it is that we get
the containers that they were using to make sure that they were going to be compliant.
And most of them were?
Most of them were.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Well, that's good. That's great.
But we do have that approximately 6 month period to transition to that before the ordinance becomes effective.
Right.
Would this also apply, because it says City of Milwaukee property, would it apply to any events we have in our parks? We just talked about CAReFREE Sundays and the vendors there, and I don't know, any umbrella parade or those kinds of things, or I guess it won't.
Yeah, I would suppose that it would. Yes.
We can put that into the special events packages and the permits when they come in and talk to Jason. The issue is that enforcement will be next to impossible simply because they won't be there long enough for us to enforce on. But we can make sure that they know the policy within their permit.
I think if it's highlighted, that would be pretty, I think they would.
Most people are going to want to.
Yeah.
And the vendors that are doing the, Sunday parkways, they have to do it in Portland. So again, they're used to it.
Used to it.
Yeah.
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 So we did that pre-ordinance outreach before this evening. And actually, the Milwaukee Environmental Stewards Group, they've been out and about the last several months and handing out reusable bags at some different events at the farmers market and other places. And I think they've been meeting with people and sort of trying to build up support for what we're doing here. So I applaud them. They've been very helpful.
Yeah, something that we might want to think about a little bit. One of the food carts is trying to use like these hard plastic baskets with a piece of paper in it. and then you're supposed to bring the basket back. And they're getting a lot of people that are just chucking them. So I was wondering if we maybe sort of had some kind of standardized thing that all of the carts use, and then there was like a basket on the basket, or basket on the trash cans where you throw away your trash and you put the...
I know that
Are you doing
Alma's
the
had
food
several
court?
conversations about the type of materials that they're using to serve, even before we went through this process, trying to figure out if we could do some sort of reusable or something that's cleaned by others. One of the issues you run into with the reusables, several of them don't have a place to clean the items, really, and so they'd be hand washing. And so you just get some resistance. They don't have a typical kitchen that they can use. Which is why the to-go boxes were great. If we could get somebody who wanted to come pick them up, the company that was actually going to do the pickup and takeaway would have been ideal.
But you know, those plastic, I mean, in the olden days, the drive-ins and the fast foods all used those, the red plastic, you know, basket with the paper liner. Mike still does, yeah.
Most places,
You
yeah,
got
you
French
can still get
fries
them all
that
over
did.
the
It's just not
place.
having a place to put them. I think
Yeah.
that's the reason why they're in trash.
and it's
is because-
inconsistent, right?
Yeah.
Some of them do it, some of them
Don't.
Yeah.
I'm curious if the teppanyaki place has problems with people throwing away their really nice bowls that they serve.
Those are beautiful, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably not.
But they feel sturdy, too. So I don't know if, and
Yeah.
again, I don't know how much cleaning they're willing to do on site.
And then over the next 6 months, as we transition to making the ordinance effective, we'll continue that outreach and education with the retailers and provide them additional information. Alma's looking at potentially providing some reusable bags as well as
Cool.
some of the, one thing I wanted to point out, and I think Councilor Beatty had sent some information on this. There's this plasticfilmrecycling.org website that actually you can go online and it identifies which retailers in the local area accept those single-use plastic bags for recycling. So if you type in the zip code, it'll tell you what stores in the area you can go and turn those in.
And they take more than the single-use plastic bags. That's what I didn't know, and I learned at the CAP Summit, actually, was they take, the wrap off of toilet paper and paper towels. That can be recycled. They take the wrap off of, water and soda, plastic, cases. I think they take dry cleaning bags. They take a lot of kinds of clean plastic bags. So if you go on that website, they have a little big diagram that shows you what kind of stuff you can put in there. So it's more than just the grocery bags. Yeah.
So that that's a resource in the interim for people to get rid of their bags if they have a problem with them.
Right. So I did find one little typo on your thing. In your definitions, city manager, you don't have the opening quotation mark. You have the closed quotation mark, but not the opening. But otherwise, I wanted to say bravo for your ordinance. It's nice and short. It has 3 whereases. It is beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, right?
It all fits on one page, even signatures. It's perfect.
And unfortunately, we will still have to read the definition of polystyrene foam tonight while we're doing the ordinance adoption. So,
Oh, yeah, that's going to be fun.
We have to read it into the record.
Yeah, because it's an amendment to an ordinance that has been published.
You only have to read that once, though.
Any further questions or comments?
I have a comment. This is my world at Metro Daily. This is what we do, and I had a lot of people come up to me in the hallway in the past week that had received advance notice of this and said, thank you, Milwaukee, for doing this. This is great. We wish more cities were doing this, and we can't believe that they haven't yet. So we were getting kudos as a city council that I would want to share. And I didn't know before did we have anything that we wanted Evan to, you had a question earlier or no?
I did ask if any other cities in Clackamas County have done a plastic bag ban.
Come on up, Evan.
Mike.
I was not
Prepared to...
I was not attending with any. Listen. Good evening, councilors. My name is Eben Polk, and I'm the supervisor for Clackamas County's Sustainability and Solid Waste Program. Lake Oswego is
currently planning and I could track down the details for that, but they're planning kind of an open house and a panel, kind of a community engagement forum on the idea of, or looking at various options to reduce single-use plastics and plastic bags. So I don't know that if their scope of conversation is going to narrow in on bans or if they're going to look at potentially fees as well. But they're talking about it. No, they have not.
So we can say we're the first in Clackamas County.
As far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Thank you.
And then Peter, I guess I just, the flyer that you handed out in advance of the meeting is one thing, but now once it's enacted, will there be a different flyer that'll kind of be made? I mean, for the big retailers, I guess what I'm thinking of is actually the farmers market. It would be good to have a flyer that could be handed out to the vendors at the farmers market.
Yes.
To help get them primed for next season. It's not something that affects them this season, but.
I was definitely planning on doing that. So yeah, we've had that discussion. So. Okay,
great.
Well, and it probably wouldn't be a terrible thing to be handing out to the other retailers because we're only talking a year-ish.
Yeah.
So a little sort of heads up. This is coming.
Yeah.
Step 2.
Any other questions or comments?
No.
Thank you very
Looks
much.
great.
Great job.
Looks great.
All of you who did this.
So the lady with the plastic bag book.
Oh yeah, Mary's all.
Do you want to do this now, or do you want to do it when in the regular meeting when we're going to vote on it, which might be late?
Yeah, that's why this afternoon he said if I came here now, I could know what time you would be talking about this. So
it's the last item.
Sure, come on up.
Yeah. So you all, I know you now, and I just want to say thank you.
Say your name and city of residence for the record.
Okay, so I'm Mary Zellharry, and I live on Jackson Street in Milwaukee. And I'm happy to be here on another issue besides housing tonight. and I think it's interesting when you mentioned that you got a phone call from Safeway. I learned about this from the manager in Safeway. I was in Safeway, and I was riled up one more time by their putting 2 things in a bag and then 2 more things in another bag and then 1 more thing in a bag. And so I found a manager, and I was as calm as I could be, and I said, I just want to know about this. And she said, guess what? We got a letter. The city is going to discuss this issue and put out an ordinance. And I said, hooray. So that's why I'm here. But I also, and I know you have seen this, but not in person. This, a friend of mine, Kathleen Casey.
I don't want you to use a microphone. I'm just warning you. That's great.
There you go. You can do it that way. Peter can
be your banner.
Okay. So a friend of mine, Kathleen Casey, who is an artist, does a variety of books on different things, and it's a panel, but she calls it a book, and you saw it, and I just think it's so cool, her illustration of the poor choice of using plastic bags. And so I wanted you to see it and to appreciate it. And of the points on this, I guess the thing that I find most disturbing is the fact that most families recycle only 1% of the plastic bags they use. And there are, I think it's 267 different species who are affected by the plastic that's in the ocean. And if you didn't have a reason already, those 2 things are reason enough.
I wonder if she would allow that to hang in the art show downstairs a few months.
She would. She's
interesting, wouldn't it?
She's not. She's out of town right now. That's why she's not here tonight. But I'll give Ann or whoever her contact information, and then that would be great.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for your interest.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we are adjourned to the work session, and we will be back here in regular session in 40 minutes.